What's up, everybody? Welcome to Make Things Tiny. My name is Mick. It's super important for you to know the person behind your tiny house build. I cannot stress that enough. It can save you tens of thousands of dollars if you choose the right builder the first time. So today we're talking to Daniel. Daniel is the owner of Venture Tiny Homes, a tiny house company based in California. Daniel is going to talk to us about his process for building tiny homes, the importance of starting out small, and he's going to give specific advice for those of you who are interested in building your own tiny house company, those of you who are interested in going tiny yourselves. So make sure you watch to the end because you're also going to get a tour of one of his high-end tiny house builds, and you don't want to miss that. If you're new to the channel, please make sure you subscribe. Let's get into it. Let's talk to Daniel. All right, I'm here today with Daniel. Daniel, thank you so much for being on the channel. Daniel is the owner of Venture Tiny Homes. I'm excited for people to learn more about you, learn about what you do, get excited about the tiny homes that you're building. If you don't mind just talking a little bit about your background and why you decided to start the company, and we can go from there.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It's always fun to talk about tiny homes. This is one of those topics that I could talk about for hours, from building to designing and the people that live in them. It's a fun industry to be in. But yeah, so I started in construction, but right out of college, basically. I had been doing a lot of different types of construction. My mom is a finished carpenter. She remodeled our kitchen. She remodeled a bunch of our house. So growing up, I was always around tools, always building stuff. So it was kind of nice to go into construction. My first job was in like rough framing and stuff. And so over the years, I've had a lot of experience in most aspects of construction, from like the beginning stages of framing and rough and plumbing all the way to finished carpentry, and setting cabinets and doing drywall and all the stuff in between. But back in 2020, I got my contractor's license. I got my teaching credential so that I could be a shop teacher.
Cool.
And then the world shut down. And unfortunately, shop teachers were some of the last to go back to work. So I had all this experience. I had my contractor's license, and I was looking for something stable. We also had our first child in 2020, so my wife and I decided that I needed something consistent. It was scary, but I decided to start building, doing construction on my own, and a friend of mine asked me to build him a tiny home.
Okay.
He set up the design, he set up the plans and all of the materials and stuff, and I led a crew of like 4 guys, and we framed it basically in his backyard. But by the end of the project, I realized this is what I want to do. I don't want to do kitchen and bathroom remodels. I don't want to go into people's houses in different locations every week or month. I want to do new construction. I'd like to do it quickly. The cool thing about building tiny homes is we build an entire house from start to finish in 2 to 3 months. And you just don't get that if you're doing large scale construction or residential houses or anything. There's just too much involved. So at the end of 2020, we finished our first tiny home, and I basically said, this is what I want to do. It took a while to get to actually starting a company. Sure. It was around mid-2021 that we officially started the company, started building our second tiny home, then our third, doing a lot of side projects on the way, kind of slowly building up to it. But in 2022, we got our first really big sale. It was 2 tiny homes that were going to go to a farm. And we like got into a warehouse. We established a team of builders. I hired 2 guys at that time. I'd already had one with me. So we had 3 full-time employees, and we started kind of going from there. And then it's just been kind of running from there. We've since moved warehouses. We're down in my hometown of Camarillo. We have a small warehouse here that we can build 2 tiny homes at a time. But we've got 5. I have 5 full-time employees now. We're cranking them out. We do about 3 every 2 months, give or take. Sometimes longer, sometimes shorter, depending on. Wait a second, I lied. We do 2 every 3 months. I think that's what I said. Yeah, we're not that fast yet. But yeah, so that's a little bit of my history, my background, and how I got into tiny homes.
No, it's cool. I think it's an interesting progression to go from watching your mom build things for like when you're younger to doing construction, and then sort of like the timing of wanting to do like teach shop, but then that sort of coinciding with the pandemic. I feel like the pandemic forced a lot of people to pivot, and for enough people, fortunately, it was like pivot in the right direction, and they're seeing some success down the line. So it's really great that you were able to make that pivot. That's not an easy decision to make, and that it's turned into what it's turned into. So I think that's really cool.
Thanks. Yeah, it's been a fun and crazy ride.
Yeah, I'm sure it sounds like it. For someone that's like, maybe they're watching this and they're thinking, okay, I would love to have you build my tiny house. What sorts of models do you offer for people, and like, what is your build process like?
So over the past 3 years, we've kind of we figured out a little bit of a system within the tiny home industry. There's everything from like super inexpensive basic models that don't cost a lot, all the way to like super high end, really expensive custom stuff. And the my goal was to kind of be in the middle, to be able to make custom models. Like we'd have a floor model that we could customize for your needs. So we have basically 2 models with some variations. It's kind of 3, but we've got one model that's a single story, basically has kitchen, bedroom, bathroom, and the living space. And it ranges anywhere from like 18, 20 feet all the way to 40 feet long. Then we have our model with a loft, which I kind of split that into two different categories. We have one that's basically just a high ceiling all the way across the board, with the kitchen and bathroom underneath the loft, and then living space with really high ceilings. That's one. We call that our Andes model. It's probably our most popular one. And then we have the Sierra model, which is same concept, has a loft over the kitchen and bathroom, but it has a lower vaulted ceiling over the living space. So it's like a split roof style. So yeah, single story, and then 2 versions of a tiny home with a loft.
I feel like that's enough variety for people. I think like having a general base, I think actually helps people, because not everybody that's going into, okay, I want to buy a tiny house knows exactly what they're looking for. So I feel like for some people, it's really helpful to have a base to build on, and be able to ask you questions throughout the process. Maybe they don't even know how they want it customized until they talk to you and they see it. Are they able to like see it? Like, do you have like, are people able to go to like a warehouse and like see the models, or is it mostly online?
So it's people can come to our warehouse and see what we're building at the time. It's not always, we don't have floor models, except one. I built a Sierra model. It was one of the first ones that we built, and I built it as a spec home. And it I have it currently sitting at a friend's house. We use it as a show model. But the reality is, everyone who's seen it loves it and wants something a little different.
Okay.
So it was a little bit hard to have like a floor model for sale. It's been worth it, but yeah. So we have one Sierra model. It's 24 feet long. It's for sale. We show it at expos. We're actually taking it to a Woodland Hills Home and Garden Expo this weekend. Show it off. But any of the tiny homes that we're currently building in our warehouse will show off and kind of walk people through them. But like you said, it does help a lot to have a base for people to work with.
Yeah.
We do build to order. So if you said, hey, I want your absolute base model Andes, I want a loft and a kitchen and bathroom, just use all the standard equipment and finishes and stuff, we can still customize what side you want the door on, what side you want the windows on, what type color countertops, what color flooring you want. And it doesn't change the price. It just allows you to make it your own, kind of within the framework of our model.
Okay. That's helpful for people to know because that's not the case for every builders. For some builders, the base literally means exactly this way, and if you change anything, it's going to cost you like $2,000 or $3,000 more dollars per thing that you change. So that's helpful that the base doesn't necessarily mean they can't change certain things here and there.
Yeah, we've found it to be pretty flexible as we're a small company. I mean, we're putting out 8 to 10 a year, and I do all the designing, I do all the customer interaction, and so it's pretty easy for me to say, hey, this is what we're going to do, and we can flip it, we can mirror it, we can add or subtract a cabinet. It doesn't really affect the price. For instance, one of the ones we're doing right now, the woman who's going to live in it has a very specific size limit that she can have. And so instead of doing like a standard 22 or 24 foot tiny home, we're doing a 23 foot tiny home that's exactly the size and length that she needed. And it really didn't change the price much because we're just adding a foot on one side. So we're able to do that being a small company and being flexible.
Yeah, I guess it would be different if you had if you were pumping out like a dozen a month or something like that. I guess it would make it a little bit harder. But that's great, though. I think that's good for people to know. I've never heard of a 23-foot tiny home, but I guess that is an interesting thing. I guess you can just add to it. It doesn't have to be even every single time, but it makes sense. And it's great that you're able to accommodate what their size limitations are, because otherwise, they might not be able to do it. So, yeah. Cool. So I know that you started the company, a couple of years ago. What are some of the challenges that you've had? Like, if you could think of like the biggest challenge you've had so far for anyone who's watching that's thinking like, okay, I want to start my own tiny house company one day. What's the biggest thing you feel like you've had to sort of adjust to or sort of like handle in the past few years?
This is a very classic problem with every contractor I've ever met. I am really good at building tiny homes. I'm very good at construction. I'm good at design, but I am not a businessman.
Sure.
And running a business is hard. And many of the contractors I've worked with or worked for, they're really good at the building side, and they make excellent products. But running a business is difficult. It's a completely different set of skills. So I've struggled with just the business side of it. There's just so many things, from setting up payroll, doing insurance, and making sure that all of my employees are completely taken care of and stuff. It's a lot of extra steps in the process of building tiny homes. I used to build tiny homes. Now I sit at a desk and my employees build tiny homes, and it's like a lifestyle change for me to be sitting behind the desk. But I do love the design aspect, so I still really enjoy what I'm doing. But it's funny, I don't actually do the building anymore. But to answer your question about someone else who's looking to start a tiny home company, I'll give them the same advice that someone gave me, and that is start small and go slow. Don't try to build 20 a year. Don't even try to build 10 a year. Just try to build 1 or 2 and get moving slowly. The longer the runway you have, the easier it is to take off. And we've experienced a lot of growing pains as we've started getting more orders and hiring more people. There are so many things to juggle with multiple orders, multiple employees, that staying small for as long as you can actually ends up being the most profitable. Because it gives you longevity, it gives you the practice. I mean, the employees that are with me, one of them has already built 15 tiny homes with me in the 3 years we've been together. That's a significant amount of experience that he has. But the other guys that I'm with, they're still just learning the ropes and figuring things out. And if we try to expand to 20 guys and build 50 this year, we're not going to make it. We don't have the capacity to do that. So small and slow is my
I
advice.
think that's great advice. It's the opposite of our culture, though. It's like the opposite of the advice that most people will give. I think most of us are taught to do as much as we can as quickly as possible. So I think that's really good advice for someone to hear, that it actually makes more sense to do, like, to set reasonable goals and do them over like a more extended period of time. Because I guess then I think that's where mastery comes in, right? Like, you don't master anything if you do it really quickly, um, and you take on too much. Like, there's no way that you can do that. That's not really like how our brains work. So I think that's good advice.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
It's been helpful for me.
Yeah. I have one last question for you. It's another piece of advice,
Yeah.
but this time is for the person who wants to go and live in a tiny house. So I have a lot of people, that are interested in going tiny that watch the channel. Some people are, they understand the industry. Some people are just like, these look cool. I have no clue if it's actually, practical for me to go tiny. Like, will it save me money? What do you say to the person who maybe has no experience with tiny houses and just thinks it might be a good idea for them to downsize, and maybe the tiny house makes the most sense for them?
Well, the first thing that I'd tell everybody is walk in one. Go visit one. Doesn't matter who or where it is, who owns it or where it is. Like, just go stand in one, because there's a lot of misconceptions about tiny homes.
Sure.
A lot of people will look at it and say, I could never live in a box, a little tiny box, or I could never live in an RV. And you realize when you stand in one that it's a lot bigger inside than you might think. The other flip side is some people are like, oh yeah, I want to go tiny and downsize. And they walk in and they go, this is not as much, space as my 2,000 square foot house. Or, they think that all of their stuff and all of their things will fit. So standing inside one is the first thing I would tell everybody. The second thing that I would tell someone is, and this is the very first 3 questions that I ask anybody who calls me and asks about tiny homes, is, do you have a place to put it?
Sure. Yeah.
Do you have permission to put it there? And do you have the money to buy it? Because so often people will have 2 out of those 3. And not be able to do one. Because many people think that, I've got money and I've got a backyard. I'm done. I'm good. But they won't go through the steps of finding if they have permission. And permission to place a tiny home on your property or on any property is different from neighborhood to neighborhood, sometimes, let alone county to county or city to city. So do a little bit of research about permission if you're allowed to. And then other people will come and they say, I have the property, I have permission to do it. How much does it cost? Or what, and they don't have the financing figured out. And that's another big aspect. There are so many ways to finance a tiny home, but none of them are easy unless you just have a lot of cash. Most tiny homes you can't get just a straight up mortgage on. So you got to figure out, am I going to pull money out of my house? Am I going to get a unsecured loan or a personal loan? Or anyways, so doing a little bit of the research on the financing is also one of the first things. And then that third aspect of, do you have a place to put it? I have many people who have also come and just said, I've got the money, where do I put these things? And every county is different. So whether or not you can buy a lot or lease some land or something, like, those are the 3 questions that I have to ask right off the bat of anybody looking to go tiny.
No, that's fair. Those are great questions too. I always tell people to research things, and I think the number, like the where you put it piece, is so crucial. I think that people don't realize how much things change from county to county, like city to city, like if you have a backyard or not. But even if you don't, I think it's even a bigger question of where you're going to put it if you don't own property and you don't have a backyard, because the interest in tiny homes is moving much quicker than tiny house communities are being built. Then RV parks are shifting their like willingness to put tiny houses in those parks. Like, all of that is not matching the pace of people's interest in tiny homes or their need of tiny homes. So I think that, it's going to be an interesting few years, like the next 3 to 5 years. I keep saying, people, I feel like, are going to be really interesting for this industry, because I do think that there is increased interest, but I don't think it's matching the different things you need to actually live in a tiny house. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah, I agree.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Daniel. I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me. I think that anyone that's watching and watches the video is going to really learn a lot about just, the way that you approach your business and your background, but also just, what it takes to build a quality tiny house, which I think more than anything, people that are watching want to know, like, where can I go get a tiny house that isn't going to fall apart on me in 6 months to a year? I think that that's something that people are being more aware of too, because there are more and more builders getting into the industry that aren't building quality homes. So I appreciate you taking the time to chat with us, and people can reach out to you. Links to your website, everything you're doing will be in the videos. So thank you so much for being on the channel, and happy to have you back on in the future too.
Thank you so much. It has been a pleasure, and
Awesome.
I've enjoyed talking with you. Thanks.
Yeah. That was my conversation with Daniel. I appreciate Daniel taking the time to walk us through sort of their inspiration for creating their company, some of the challenges that they faced as a tiny house builder, and also giving us a tour of their luxury tiny house. So I'm excited for you all to learn more about Daniel. Make sure you reach out if you have questions. I cannot stress this enough. I've said this a million times on my channel, but I'll say it over and over again. You have to ask questions so that you can get the right tiny house. You have to ask questions so that you can know where to put it and you can put it in the right place. So make sure you reach out and ask questions. You can reach out to Daniel, check out their links, everything in the video description here. You can reach out to me, send me an email at makethingstiny@gmail.com. I'd love to help you find your dream tiny house, community, whatever it is that you need. So make sure you reach out as well too. As always, I appreciate you guys so much. Thank you for watching. Make sure you subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Don't forget to think tiny.